I'm Daniel Rivera, 33, a former firefighter and the youngest son of the Rivera family. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into my mother's house was the warmth, not the emotional kind, but the literal wave of heat that clung to my face as the door closed behind me. The kitchen was in full motion, smells of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and garlic butter thickening the air. The house was alive with noise, laughter, silverware clinking, music playing softly from the Bluetooth speaker on the counter. And yet, none of it was for me. I stood by the coat rack, a duffel bag at my feet, my arms still in my jacket sleeves. No one turned. My sister-in-law brushed past me with a tray of deviled eggs. My cousin Frank gave me a fleeting glance before shouting, "Happy Turkey Day" to someone else across the room. Uh, Daniel. A voice. Sharp. It was Aunt Rita. She approached with a tight smile, her eyes flickering to the scars that peeked out along the side of my jaw. "Oh, honey. You didn't tell anyone you were coming." "I texted Mom," I replied, setting the bag down carefully. She pursed her lips. "Well, the seating's kind of full. You might need to squeeze at the end of the kids' table, but maybe not stay too long. You know how Grandpa gets, he's still sensitive about loud things." I nodded. She meant the way I breathed. The rasp that never went away since the explosion. The oxygen burn damage made every inhale sound like a soft growl. I crossed into the living room slowly. My brother Mateo stood near the fireplace, a glass of red wine in one hand, his other arm draped around his fiancée, Callie. She wore gold and navy sharp lines, expensive earrings, polished everything. Her eyes met mine for a second, and I saw it, the quick flicker downward, at my hands, my neck, my skin. "Didn't know you were coming, Dan," Mateo said with a casual smirk. "You could have given us a heads up. Mom had to move things around just to make space." I looked at him. "It's Thanksgiving. I came home." Callie giggled. "Well, it's good to see you. In person. I mean, last time I saw your photos." "Callie." Mateo cut in gently, but it was too late. The meaning hung there, thick and obvious. She'd seen the hospital photos, the ones they passed around like trophies after the incident. The scarred hero, the melted uniform, the bandaged ghost of a man. Aunt Rita clapped her hands. "Let's all head to the dining room. Food's getting cold." As people shuffled in, I hovered awkwardly. Someone else brushed past me, my cousin Ava, and whispered, "Just take a seat at the end." "Okay." The kids' table was a fold-out in the hallway. Plastic chairs. I sat, my knees nearly hitting the underside. A plate appeared in front of me with cold mashed potatoes and one small slab of turkey breast, dry and cracked. No one talked to me. Not really. A few sideways glances. My cousin Liam whispered something to his sister, and both of them giggled while looking at my face. I caught the word two-face. Classic. Then it got worse. Uncle Don, drunk as usual, stood up mid-toast. "Let's give thanks," he said, sloshing his beer. "For family that shows up, dresses like normal people, and doesn't scare the kids." A few gasps, a few nervous chuckles. I said nothing. I looked down at my hands, at the faded texture of my jacket sleeves, and knew what was underneath. The skin grafts, the melted webbing where my arm used to look like everyone else's, and under that, something heavier. In the silence that followed his toast, someone else stood up. "Excuse me," said a voice. A woman, mid-50s, tailored pantsuit, silver gray streak in her tied-back hair. She stood at the far end of the room, near the front door. No one had seen her come in. Mom turned. "Can I help you?" She pulled something from her purse, a small case. polished and black. I was told this was the Rivera household. I'm with the fire department, Los Angeles County. Everyone went still. She walked over to me. I stood slowly. She opened the box. I was instructed to deliver this in person, for bravery above and beyond the call of duty, for saving a family trapped beneath a collapsed structure, at the cost of personal safety. Mr. Daniel Rivera, you've been awarded the Medal of Valor. She said it clearly, firmly, and when she opened the box and held it toward me, I took off my jacket. The scars on my arms twisted like lightning. The grafts shimmered under the dining room light. The room was completely silent. I reached forward and accepted the medal. Everyone stared. Callie's hand dropped from Mateo's arm. My mother blinked rapidly. The kids fell quiet. Uncle Don let his beer tip sideways. No one said a word. The only sound was the rustle of cloth and the soft clink of the metal against my skin. And just for a second, I looked at the camera and said, softly, if you've ever been mocked or misunderstood by your own family, if you've ever walked into a room and felt erased, comment below where you're watching this from. You're not alone. And if you've carried something heavy in silence, click like, subscribe, and keep going. You matter. Then I looked back at my family. I was no longer invisible. I was the center of the room, and not one of them knew what to say next. The silence after the medal presentation felt like a vacuum. I could hear the soft mechanical hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the creak of someone adjusting their stance on the wood floor. My mother was the first to react. She brought both hands to her mouth, her eyes darting between me and the uniformed woman as if trying to confirm that this wasn't some elaborate misunderstanding. Wait, she said in a quiet voice, stepping forward. Is this real? The woman from the department gave a small, professional nod. It's very real. His captain wanted to be here himself, but Daniel insisted it wasn't necessary. He didn't want a ceremony. So we respected that until the medal arrived and I saw the name. I served on call with his father. I knew I had to bring it myself. My father. Her voice cracked something open in me that I wasn't prepared for. Dad would have... I started, but didn't finish. Aunt Rita's voice cut in, bright and too loud. Well, this is all a surprise. But of course we're proud of you. Danny, you should have told us. We would have arranged something special. A little speech? Maybe a cake? I didn't want a celebration. I interrupted. Quieter than her, but firmer. I just wanted a chair at the table. Someone cleared their throat behind me. Mateo. He stepped forward with that politician's smile he'd perfected over the years. Well, I think this is a good moment for us to show appreciation. Right. Everyone. He turned to the others, his hand gesturing to lead a round of applause. It was weak at first, polite, a few hesitant claps from cousins. My uncle gave a single clap, then took another sip of beer. The kids looked confused, watching the adults for cues. No one really knew how to handle the shift. Callie stepped next to Mateo, her voice sugary. Daniel, that's incredible. Really. I had no idea you were still active with the department. I'm not, I said, meeting her eyes. Retired last year. Oh, she said. Still, that's such an honor. It's just unexpected. Of course it was. I looked at the plate of cold food still sitting on the plastic fold-out table. I had no appetite. Not now. Not here. My mom approached more slowly than the rest. She reached for my wrist, fingers brushing over the uneven skin there. She didn't pull away this time. I didn't know how to talk to you after the fire, she whispered. You changed, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I thought, maybe giving you space was better. I didn't need space. I replied, I needed to know I was still part of this family. Her lip trembled. She turned and called toward the kitchen. "We'll fix you a new plate. Sweetheart, fresh potatoes, not those cold lumps. And you can sit here next to me." I didn't move right away. The woman from the department touched my shoulder. "I'll give you all some privacy now. But Daniel, this community owes you a debt. Don't forget that." She slipped out the door with quiet grace, and as it clicked shut behind her, the temperature in the room seemed to shift. Eyes softened. My cousin Ava came forward with a timid smile and muttered, "That was cool. I didn't know you were, like, in an explosion." I gave a single nod. Uncle Don muttered, "Could have just said you were a hero instead of making us feel bad." He laughed, but it died in his throat. No one joined him. As I sat down at the main table, in a chair that had been hastily cleared between my mom and Ava, I could feel the heat of all the stares on my skin. I wasn't used to it anymore. Not this kind. Usually when people stared, it was at the uneven patches, the melted curves, the discoloration. But now they were seeing something else. I wasn't sure which felt worse. Mateo raised his glass. "To Daniel, and to family. May we always recognize what matters before someone else has to remind us." I didn't raise my glass. I didn't even have one. But I let him say the words. Dinner resumed in hesitant waves. Conversation tiptoed forward, cautiously circling around safer topics. My mom asked me about my new place, and I answered. My cousin asked if I was dating anyone, and I lied. Even Mateo tried asking about my therapy dog, and I gave him the dog's name, Jasper. He smiled, as if proud to know that. But the thing about sudden recognition is that it doesn't erase the years that came before it. It just makes them heavier. Like now I had to carry both the loneliness of being ignored and the awkward weight of being noticed too late. At one point, I stood and excused myself to the hallway, just to breathe. The jacket I'd removed now hung limply on the coat rack, and the metal's weight against my chest was beginning to feel less like validation and more like armor I didn't ask to wear. Callie followed me out. She leaned beside me, wine glass still in hand, perfume, sweet and sharp. "Listen," she said. "I'm sorry if I ever said anything insensitive. Mateo didn't tell me much about what happened, and I just assumed you were staying away for personal reasons. I was recovering." I said simply, "Right. Of course." She hesitated. "Can I ask what happened? Like, actually," I glanced at her, and for a moment I considered giving her the story, the collapsing stairwell, the little girl whose arm I held through a wall as it caught fire, the heat that felt like death itself climbing my back. But instead I said, "I did my job." And that was enough. Callie bit her lip, then gave a small nod and returned to the dining room. I stared at the reflection in the hallway mirror. My cheek, the one that still looked normal, had a faint sheen from the heat inside. The other side was all topography ridges, valleys, skin that had been moved from one place to another. My eyes, though, were the same, tired, but mine, from the living room. I heard the kids playing a video game. I heard Mateo laughing at something Mom said. I heard Ava shout, "Save Daniel a slice of pecan." I stepped back in. Not because I was healed, not because everything was okay, but because, for the first time in years, they'd made space for me. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to accept it. The rest of Thanksgiving passed in a blur, like a dream I hadn't prepared myself to be part of. I sat at the table with my family again, full-sized chairs, polished silverware, linen napkins instead of folded paper towels. I heard my name in conversations that didn't involve pity or obligation. My plate was full. My mother touched my arm once during the meal without flinching, but it all felt like I was a guest in someone else's skin. Later that evening, after most of the plates had been cleared and the children had retreated to their video games and sugar comas, my brother found me alone in the backyard. The night air was crisp, the stars above us stubbornly bright even with the glare from the porch lights. I had taken a seat on the swing bench, letting it creak back and forth with the faint rhythm of memory. Mateo stood beside me, hands in his pockets, a bottle of sparkling water dangling from one finger. He didn't speak for a moment, just stood there, looking at the gravel, the fence, the old sycamore Dad had planted the year I was born. I should have said something sooner, he finally muttered. About what happened? About what you did. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I ran my fingers over the edge of the swing seat. It had the same chipped paint it had 20 years ago. You didn't know. That's not true. He exhaled. I knew enough. I knew about the fire. I saw the news footage. I even read the write-up in the department bulletin. But I guess part of me... He paused. I guess I just didn't know how to fit the version of you I remembered into the man who walked into that building. You didn't have to fit me anywhere, I said. Just not erase me. He took that in quietly. I did that. The wind moved through the dry leaves, a rustling that sounded almost like whispering. Mateo stepped onto the edge of the wooden porch and sat down beside me. Do you remember when we were kids? He said. And you caught that possum in the garage. Yeah, I said, a laugh sneaking up on me. You screamed so loud Mom thought you'd broken your arm. He chuckled. It was ugly, hissing like it was possessed. You climbed onto the washing machine and made me chase it out with a broom. I called you a maniac. But I think you always liked walking toward chaos. I didn't like it, I said. I just never wanted anyone else to get hurt. We sat in silence again. Then Mateo said, more carefully this time, you know, I think Mom was scared. When the hospital called, she didn't know what to do with the words skin graft and explosive injuries. She thought she'd lose you entirely. When she didn't, maybe she didn't know how to look at you anymore without seeing what she almost lost. I know, I said, softer than before. But I was still here. He nodded. We failed you, Dan. All of us. Even Dad. Before he passed, he had this idea of you being soft, or lost, or not knowing who you were, and none of us updated the picture. I turned to him. I wasn't soft. I was just quiet. And we didn't listen. The porch door creaked behind us. We both turned to see my mother peeking out, wrapped in her cardigan. There's pie, she said, and coffee. But I can bring it out here, if you want. Mateo looked at me. I gave a nod. He went inside with her, leaving me alone again for a few minutes. The kind of quiet I used to have every day after rehab numbness under the skin. The phantom itching of nerves that didn't exist anymore. Even silence had memory in it. From my jacket, still draped over the porch rail, I pulled a folded envelope. I had carried it for months. It wasn't meant for anyone at first, but it had become something more. When my mother returned with 2 mugs and a slice of pecan pie, she sat beside me without saying a word. The mug in her hand had the faded bluebird print I remembered from childhood. She didn't flinch when our arms touched. This house is still yours, she said after a while. If you ever want to come back. I don't, I said gently. Not permanently, but I'll visit. She nodded. Her hand shook slightly as she set the pie down between us. I held out the envelope. What's this? She asked. My statement from the department. I said. The final report. It details the fire, the collapse, the injuries. I thought maybe if you read it, you'd stop pretending it didn't happen. She held it in her lap, staring at the corner of the paper. I was afraid to ask. She whispered, "But I'll read it. I promise." Inside the house, someone turned up the music. A soft guitar intro filled the air, one of those old songs we used to dance to in the kitchen while drying dishes. I looked through the window and saw Aunt Rita trying to teach Ava how to swirl whipped cream into a perfect peak. Callie was laughing real laughter this time, and Mateo stood behind her, not watching her. Where a little girl I didn't recognize, probably a cousin's child, was staring at me. "You have magic skin," she said. "Do I?" "Yeah. It's like dragon armor." I knelt beside her, smiling. "It helped me fight a big fire." "Did you win? I saved someone?" I said. "So yeah, I won." She beamed and ran off toward the dessert table. It was late by the time I collected my things. Mateo walked me to the door. "You coming back for Christmas?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "You still gonna sit me at the kids' table?" He laughed. "No. We'll get you a seat at the head. Or at least next to Grandma so she can pinch your cheeks like old times." I nodded. "We'll see." He reached out tentatively and we hugged for the first time in years. It wasn't tight, it wasn't long, but it was real. I stepped into the cold night, the metal still tucked under my shirt, my scars cooled by the wind. For once, I didn't feel like I had to hide. I didn't go home that night, not to the apartment, at least. Instead, I drove. No destination in mind, just roads, just silence, just headlights washing over empty lanes. I passed the river, the old mill, the corner lot where we used to set off fireworks in July. The scar tissue on my arms ached slightly with the temperature drop, a phantom warning my body had developed. But I kept driving. The metal sat on the passenger seat beside me, still in its open box. Every time I glanced at it, I didn't quite know how to feel. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the recognition. I did. But it also felt detached from me, like it had been given to someone who only existed in a single moment, not the whole person who carried it afterward. When I finally parked, it was near Station 42, the place I hadn't visited since my retirement. The firehouse looked the same, brick and shadow, yellow-lit interior, 2 engines quietly asleep inside. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at it, remembering the burn of the uniform, the smell of insulation and melted plastic, the girl I carried out her tiny arms around my neck, coughing, crying, her mother screaming outside, the wall coming down seconds after I handed her over. I hadn't spoken to anyone from the department since my release from physical rehab. Not really. The conversations had thinned to polite messages, forwarded calls, unreturned voicemails. Some brothers fade when you can't carry gear anymore. Others just don't know how to talk to a face they can't recognize. I didn't blame them. I wasn't the same either. I reached into my glove box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A thank you card. Unsigned. That had arrived weeks ago. No return address. Just a single sentence written in blue ink. "You gave me back my daughter. Thank you for not stopping. I didn't know her name. I didn't need to." That one line had said more than my own family ever had. I sat in the car until dawn began to break, a thin sliver of orange cutting the horizon like a healing scar. Then I drove back to the city. When I opened the door to my apartment, Jasper padded up to me immediately, tail wagging, eyes wide. His black fur shimmered in the early light. I knelt and let him sniff my hands, lick my cheek. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "You missed me." He let out a soft bark and nosed the metal case on the floor. I smiled. "Yeah, me too." The apartment was small, clean, quiet. No family portraits, no trophies, just a bookshelf, a coffee table, a single framed photo of my academy graduation. I took off my shoes and laid the medal down next to the certificate from rehab, the one they gave me not for surviving the fire, but for learning to walk again, to use my fingers again, to breathe without assistance. The rest of the weekend passed uneventfully. I didn't hear from anyone until Sunday evening, when my phone buzzed with a text. "Mateo, hey. Mom said you left early. Want to do dinner next week? Just us." I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "Yeah, let's do it." The following Thursday, we met at a small diner halfway between his neighborhood and mine, neutral territory. He was already seated when I arrived, waving me over with a half smile. "I got the corner booth," he said, sliding a coffee across the table, just like old times. I chuckled and sat down. The waitress came and went. We didn't say much until the food arrived: meatloaf for him, grilled fish for me. "Mom's been reading that report," he said after a while. "She called me crying 2 nights ago. I didn't ask what part made her cry. I could guess. The diagram of where the roof collapsed. The doctor's summary of third-degree burns. The photo they took on day 1. My face barely visible under tubes and gauze. She said she never realized how close she came to losing you," he continued. I told her that wasn't the point. I said the point was, you didn't give up. Even when we gave up on you. "That's generous," I said. "You didn't give up. You just paused." He winced a little. "Still feels like failure." "It was," I said gently. "But it's over now." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking. Maybe you could come to the fundraiser next month. It's for first responders' mental health support. I'm on the board this year." I raised an eyebrow. I know. Weird. Right. But Callie's friend works with the outreach team. They need someone to speak. Someone who's been through it. The subtext was clear. He was asking if I'd speak. "I don't know," I said. "I haven't talked about that night in front of strangers. Maybe that's why you should." He hesitated. "People think medals mean closure, but I think the story after the fire matters just as much." I looked down at my hands, still mottled, still stiff in the mornings. "Let me think about it. That's all I ask." We finished our meal mostly in silence. But this time it wasn't awkward. It was calm. Grounded. After we left, he hugged me again. This time tighter. That night, I sat on my balcony with Jasper curled at my feet. The city lights shimmered like something half-remembered. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. There were new comments on the video I'd uploaded, my quiet little Thanksgiving moment, which had somehow gone viral. I hadn't expected it. I had only posted the clip because someone, probably Ava, had recorded it. It showed the moment I removed my jacket, the metal gleaming in the light, my scars uncovered, the family frozen in shock. I read through the comments. I cried watching this. He deserved better. My brother has burn scars too. You're not alone. This is what real strength looks like. Subscribed. Thank you for sharing your truth. I closed my eyes. There were voices out there who saw me, maybe not in person, maybe not perfectly, but they saw. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to be seen. I stood and walked inside, Jasper padding behind me. I picked up the medal and clipped it back into its box. Then I grabbed the blank notepad from my desk and began to write rough, broken, honest sentences. Maybe it would become a speech. Maybe it would just be for me. But either way, it was time. The words didn't come all at once. I'd sit at my desk at night with a mug of lukewarm tea. Jasper curled at my feet, the notepad open and blank. Sometimes I wrote 2 lines. Sometimes I crossed out entire paragraphs. What do you say to a room full of strangers about the worst thing that ever happened to you without sounding like you're begging for sympathy? I didn't want pity. I didn't want awe. I just wanted them to know that the fire didn't end when they put it out. The truth was, I'd been burning long after the flames were gone. Mateo texted every few days, never pushing too hard. His tone was different now, gentler, respectful. Mom called once. She didn't say much, but her voice cracked when she asked if I needed anything. I told her I was okay. That was true. Mostly. I still remembered the moment they took off the bandages the first time. The nurses said I was brave, but I wasn't. I was afraid to look. It felt like being introduced to a stranger who had my name and none of my skin. I kept expecting someone to say, "Just kidding," and hand me back the old version of my face, the one people used to smile at without hesitation, but no one said that. And eventually, I stopped waiting. Instead, I learned to walk again, then to cook simple meals, then to drive, to wear long sleeves, to avoid mirrors in public bathrooms. Each little thing was its own kind of fire escape. So I wrote that down. Not the details of the explosion, not the smoke or the collapse, or the little girl whose screams still sometimes reached me in dreams. I wrote about learning to exist again. I was still writing when the day of the fundraiser arrived. I stood in front of my closet with a button-down shirt in one hand and a fire department hoodie in the other. The button-down still felt stiff around the grafts on my shoulders. The hoodie was soft, familiar, but I knew what I had to do. I chose a clean charcoal gray dress shirt and rolled the sleeves to the elbows, where the scars stopped. I left the medal at home. It wasn't about the award. It never had been. The event was held at a small community center with glass walls and polished concrete floors. The room was full by the time I arrived, dozens of faces I didn't know. Some were young, fresh-faced cadets with bright eyes and neat hair. Others were older, eyes lined with memory, hands steady and thick from years of labor. A few nodded at me. One even stood and clapped my shoulder. "Rivera." "Right," the man said. He wore a captain's badge. "I read your report." "Hell of a thing." "Thanks," I said quietly. Callie met me near the podium. She was dressed simply, but there was something different in her demeanor. Less polish, more presence. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Mateo's in the back setting up the live stream. No pressure, but people are really looking forward to hearing from you." I nodded. When the time came, I walked to the podium. The microphone was already on. The room fell quiet. I stared at my own hands for a moment. Then I began. "My name is Daniel Rivera. I was a firefighter for 12 years. I paused. Not from fear, from grounding. I'm not here tonight to talk about heroism, or bravery, or medals. I'm here to talk about what happens after the fire goes out." The room listened. I was injured in a structure collapse 3 years ago. 3rd-degree burns, lung trauma. I spent 6 months in recovery. Learned how to walk again. Learned how to breathe again. But what no one teaches you, what no one prepares you for, is how to exist in a world that doesn't recognize you anymore. I scanned the crowd. People stare. Some look away. Some call you strong. Some call you a warning. But few ask how you're doing. Few ask what it's like to return to a family gathering and realize your chair's been moved to the hallway. There were a few audible exhales in the room. I'm not bitter. Or maybe I was. But I learned something: healing isn't about returning to what you were. It's about becoming who you are now and giving others the chance to meet that person. I let that hang there. Pain leaves marks on skin, on memory. But so does endurance. So does love. So does survival. I looked toward the back of the room, where Mateo stood holding his phone like a proud dad at a school recital. Behind him, a few late arrivals filtered in. One of them, an older woman with trembling hands, had tears running down her cheeks. I ended simply, "I don't need you to remember me as a hero. I just need you to remember that silence doesn't mean peace, and scars don't mean broken." There was no applause at first, just stillness. Then someone stood, and then another, and then the room filled with quiet, reverent clapping that didn't feel forced or pitying. It felt like breath, like air returning to lungs. Afterward, I stood near the exit, shaking hands. A few people shared their stories. A young woman told me her brother had been burned in an oil fire and hadn't spoken to anyone in months. An older man said he'd retired after a rescue that went wrong and had never stopped feeling like he left part of himself in that wreckage. I didn't try to fix anyone. I just listened. Mateo came up behind me at the end, clapped me gently on the back. "You were amazing," he said. "I was honest," I replied. He nodded. "That's even better." We rode back together in silence, his car humming beneath us. At a red light, he turned to me. "You're coming for Christmas." "Right." I hesitated. "If you're sure I'm welcome." He looked hurt. "Dan, you don't need to ask that anymore." I turned toward the window. Snow was starting to fall, soft flakes landing against the windshield like the sky was trying to forgive something. We pulled up to my place, and I reached for the door handle. "Hey," Mateo said suddenly. "You were always the brave one. Even before the fire." I met his eyes. "Took you long enough to figure that out?" He smiled. "Yeah, but I'm here now." That night, I hung the speech on my wall beside the medal, not as proof, not as pride, but as a reminder of who I became, of who I was always becoming, and who, despite everything, I still was. Christmas came fast. Snow covered the sidewalks like a white hush had fallen over the city. People rushed past each other with bags, scarves, and paper cups of coffee. But it all felt slower to me this year, softer. The noise didn't reach as deep. It was like I'd stepped out of a long tunnel and now everything echoed a little less. Mateo picked me up on Christmas Eve. Jasper stayed behind with a friend from the station who volunteered to watch him. Mateo's car was already stuffed with gifts in the trunk, a mess of half-tied bows and mismatched wrapping paper. "I wrapped that one," he said, pointing to a box with crooked tape. "Try not to laugh." "I'll try," I said. The ride to our childhood home was filled with music, old songs, songs Dad used to whistle without knowing the words. We didn't talk much, just listened. Sometimes that's enough. When we pulled up to the house, I saw the lights, first rows of them strung across the porch, blinking slow and steady. I hadn't seen them lit in years. My mother was never one for decoration after Dad died. But now, the whole front yard shimmered like someone remembered what warmth could look like. "Did Mom do that?" I asked. "She got help," Mateo said. "I think she wanted it to feel like before." Inside, the house smelled like cloves and roast ham. Ava ran down the hallway, screaming with laughter, a Santa hat bouncing on her head. Frank Jr. chased her with a foam sword. The walls were plastered in garland and cut-out snowflakes. The warmth wasn't just from the radiator this time. When I stepped into the living room, silence fell. Not awkward, just still. My mother stood near the tree, holding a small box. She looked up. "You're here," she said. I nodded. I said I would be. She walked toward me slowly. Then, without a word, she placed the box in my hand. It was wrapped in blue paper, my name scribbled in black marker. I sat on the couch and opened it. Inside was a frame, a photo, me, in uniform, before the fire, standing beside Dad at the department's old charity barbecue. He had his arm around my shoulder. I was laughing. Really. Laughing before I knew how quickly things could burn. Tucked behind the photo was something else. A thin chain. Dog tags. Mine. They'd melted slightly at the edges. I hadn't seen them since the hospital. I thought they'd been lost. We kept them, my mother said, sitting beside me. I couldn't look at them for a long time, but I think they belong to you now. I didn't say anything. I just pressed them between my fingers and nodded. Dinner that night was loud. Laughter bounced off the ceiling. Wine flowed freely. No one stared. No one whispered. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest at my own family's table. Aunt Rita clinked a glass at the end and stood for a toast. To the ones who left too early, she said. To the ones who came back changed. And to those who kept showing up anyway. Glasses lifted. I drank from mine slowly. After dessert, I stepped outside onto the porch. Snow was falling again. Soft. Relentless. My breath clouded in front of me. I closed my eyes. Behind me, I heard the door open. Mateo joined me, handing me a mug of hot cider. You good? He asked. Getting there, I said. We stood in silence again, watching the street, the stars hidden behind clouds. Mom wants to do something tomorrow morning, he said. She's been planning it for weeks. What is it? She wouldn't tell me. Just said, let Daniel rest tonight. I gave a soft laugh. I'm not tired. No, he said. But you've been carrying a lot. I looked at him. So have you. He nodded. Difference is, you never put it down. We went back inside. I slept in the guest room, the one that used to be Mateo's before he moved out. The sheets smelled like lavender and laundry soap. On the nightstand was a framed photo of Dad holding baby me. I stared at it for a while before sleep took me. The next morning, I was woken by the smell of pancakes. I came downstairs barefoot, my hoodie pulled over my head. The kitchen buzzed with morning energy. Mom stood at the stove, humming softly. Sit, she said without turning. Coffee's hot. I did. A plate appeared in front of me a moment later. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, just like childhood. Then she reached into her apron pocket and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. Open it, she said. I unfolded it. It was handwritten, neat, small lines. I wrote this the night after Thanksgiving, she said. I wasn't sure I'd give it to you, but now I am. It was a letter. From her. To me. Daniel, I'm sorry I disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. I watched my son suffer and didn't know how to hold that pain. I was afraid of what I'd say, of saying the wrong thing, of seeing my failure reflected in your eyes. But silence became its own betrayal. You walked through fire and came out alive, and I shrank back, like a coward. But I see you now. Not just your scars, not just the metal. I see your heart, your endurance, your bravery. You are my son, my miracle. Please let me keep learning how to love you better. Love, Mom. I read it twice. My hands shook the first time, less the second. She sat down beside me and said nothing, just placed her hand over mine and let it stay. Later that afternoon, we bundled up and drove to the cemetery. We stood before Dad's grave in silence, Mateo beside me, Mom holding a small poinsettia plant. I brought someone, she said quietly, placing it down. He's been through more than any of us, and he's still here. Mateo put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't get to see you in that uniform, but I think he knows now. I knelt down in the snow and brushed a bit of frost from the engraved name. Hey, Dad, I said softly. It took me a while, but I made it. The wind picked up. I felt it run across my neck, cold and sharp, but not cruel. When we returned home, the living room was lit with golden light. I stood in the doorway, looking at it all, the couch, the tree, the laughter spilling in from the kitchen. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the window pane, scarred, solemn, strong, and human. Jasper bounded toward me the moment we stepped back inside. Mateo had brought him over as a surprise. He barked once, then leaned his head against my leg, tail wagging. Good boy, I whispered. We're home. That night, as snow whispered against the windows, I stood alone in the hallway. I traced my fingers along the frames on the wall, birthdays, holidays, milestones. Then I paused. There was a new one. Me, standing at the podium, speaking. Behind me, a banner that read, Firefighters for Mental Health. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a newspaper clipping. Just a moment. A truth. Captured. I didn't smile, but I felt it. Deep and quiet. A peace that asked for nothing in return. For once, I wasn't surviving. I was living.